Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to talk about this theory. It is new to me, and I've just been wanting to share it with everyone. And it really is just called the ladder of participation. So Evie was so nice in giving me a really official, wonderful title. But really, we're just going to focus on the ladder of participation today. So hopefully, by the end of our time together, I won't go down too many rabbit holes and get excited and talk about things that do not fall under these objectives. My hope is at the end of this hour that we spend together, you all will really be able to articulate where the ladder came from, why it's useful, why we should have it in our toolbox. Identify where you think your organization falls on the ladder, and then maybe create some action steps on how we can bump up at least to the next level on this level of participation. So real quick, this is me. No kids of myself, but I do have 3 pets. We have a puppy, which my husband and I had a promise that we would never ever get a puppy, and then he came home with a puppy. So we have a puppy. Our big boy in the blue collar passed away over the summer, but I can't let him go because he was my big boy and I still will always have him. My Eddie is our pit bull. Coco is the queen of the house. She runs the show. She tells us when to go to sleep, when to get up, when to fill her food bowl. And then my husband, Chris, is a math teacher. I have been in the field of prevention for over 20 years. I love all of the people. There's so much knowledge and expertise in this room right here that anytime that I say something and you're like, whoa, 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 or you have an experience that you would love to share, please unmute yourself. Tell myself to calm down. Tell me to slow down. Say, hey, let me share with you. I really, really like the capacity building part of my job, and that's working with you all, sharing knowledges, sharing resources. So really, I just like this to kind of be laid back. I'll give you some thoughts. You guys take them in. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me how they apply to the work that you're doing. So I want to be I want to create a safe space here. We're all sources, so we're safe space people, right? But really for this particular ladder that we're going to talk about, there is absolutely no shame on where you are on the ladder, right? We don't necessarily get taught how to give advocacy and agency when working in youth-led prevention. We kind of pick up tips and traits here and there, and some of us just have that natural talent and gift. But I don't really remember being, in college and looking at classes and being like, oh yeah, I could totally learn this. Some of us that maybe have social backgrounds might have it, or counseling backgrounds might have it, but I don't necessarily think that this is what we spent a lot of time on. And so I get excited when I find some research in this area and would really like to pull it apart with you all. No guilt, no judgment, no finger pointing. This is just an open share here. We're all at different levels on all different rungs on the ladder. And there's reasons why we're on that ladder rung, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then also, if you can, understand that this really is about letting go of some of the control, letting go of some of the power, and letting our young coworkers maybe flounder a little bit, maybe fail a little bit, maybe push back a little bit. And sometimes that can feel uncomfortable and can create some anxiety. And we're just kind of sit in that a little bit. All right, questions, comments, or concerns before we jump in? I was introduced to the ladder by this wonderful group of young people. This is HAY, which stands for Hopeful Empowered Youth. HAY is out of Interact for Health here down in Cincinnati. They have a catch basin that's larger just than Hamilton County, filters into Indiana and Kentucky a little bit. But really what HAY is doing is they're bringing young people together to really kind of brainstorm and think about ways that we can create safe spaces for teens and safe adults. And in coming across some of the research, they found this ladder and they've been sharing and teaching us about this ladder. They're doing some really innovative, wonderful work. At the time that I was putting the slides together, their website was down. Their website is now up and running. I'm going to share it in the chat. Last Monday night, I went to their annual celebration, and they've created some resources that aren't yet on the resource page of the link that I just sent there, but should be soon, that I think that you guys will really enjoy. They created a flow chart for young people of if I think I might need help. they created some language and some scripts and some visuals around how I navigate if I want therapy, if I'm interested in therapy. And then they've done some wonderful infographics around data and really helping explain data to those of us that maybe aren't necessarily familiar with very specific topics about, suicide rates and support and stigma reduction. So wonderful, fantastic group. I want to give them all the credit. I'm so thankful for the work that they're doing. What they did is they took a resource from the Voices Youth Program. So that's the third bullet down there. The Voices Youth Program created this one pager that I'm going to show you. But that originally came from Roger Hart's documents, and Roger's came from Sherry's. So I'll give all the credit at the end. There's links, there's PDFs. You'll go to the white pages, you'll go to the research page, but you'll see that this has kind of been a creation with a little bit of prevention added to it. It didn't originate in this field of prevention, and you'll see the original documents, but with the layer of those that are doing the prevention work, you can see where this can really kind of fold into the work that we're doing, particularly with probably more like 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and early college, right? So here is our ladder of participation. Real quick, the 1 is the least, right? The least amount of participation, involvement. And then that 9 is where we're hopefully achieving to go to. And we'll go through each of these individually, but again, making sure that I reference the original sources. Voices put this visual together, and it was adapted from Hart's Children's Participation from Tokenism to Citizenship. I think one of two things. When they first presented this to me, I'm like, oh, this is a really nice visual, right? I can really understand maybe when I first started in this career, why I was at the level I was at, and then what skills, what capacity building, what mentorship that I needed to move up onto these different rungs. And I'll say that it isn't the same for every single group, right? Your agency may be working with an assortment of different young people, and that doesn't mean that your ladder of participation, your rung level, is the same, and that's okay, right? What the research says is there is some give and take and some ebb and flow depending on the dynamics of the group, depending on the dynamics of the adults and the young people. But ultimately, we want them to get the most participation out. If we are saying we are youth-led, then we really want to stay away from those 1, 2, 3, and 4s. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So we're going to stop at this number 1. And 20 plus years ago, when I first got into this work, we saw a lot of this, right? First rung, bottom of the ladder, manipulation. Adults use youth to support causes and pretend that their causes are inspired by the youth. Can any of you, not from your own experiences, but just in general, give me an example of what this might look like? Drop it in the chat or unmute yourself. Against drunk driving campaigns and scare tactics? Okay, Ronnie, yeah, thank you. Yeah, yes! Yes, Haley, that's not silly at all. No, yes, absolutely. I can think of an example where I was in a similar situation, right? So Haley put adults, they want a certain t-shirt design and they're claiming that the youth created it, right? A tagline, a social media post, absolutely. I've even seen this in the greater scheme of things where an organization, an agency, a coalition, they wrote for a grant, and then they had members of the coalition or members of the organization's kids, right, come on and be like the spokesperson for the grants. And so, yeah, really the young people have no say. They probably have no education. They probably were like 5 minutes before said, oh, just come in here and say real quickly these kind of few things. Or, we're going to do a news interview, come sit next to me, right? Very, very, very little in action. Listen, and I'm looking at a lot of you guys here, and a lot of you are top of the ladder here, so don't hold back on how you got to the top of the ladder and how your youth experience are driven by that. Fantastic. That second rung in that letter is decoration, right? And sometimes you see manipulation and decoration at the same time. And so really they're like, here's my shiny youth. Look how nice they are. Look how fantastic. They probably don't say very much, right? They smile, they do the beauty queen wave, right? But there's not a whole lot of input they're giving. It's maybe they show up at not even at a meeting, but like at the year-round retreat. Maybe they show up for photo ops. Maybe they're, in social media posts. But really, it's the pretty nice youth, freshman, senior, freshman through senior year. And, once they're gone, then you're looking for the next decoration youth. They might be in all of the marketing. They might be in, going to dinners and being introduced, but they're just simply there for window dressing. This next one, and you can see they build on each other. There's layers that overlap, is tokenism, right? And tokenism is they look like they're given a voice, but really it's just speaking points. It's just cue cards. It's just a script. They really have no organic voice. They have no self. They're not putting it into their own words. They're not giving input. They're not giving edits to it. It's here, read off this card, or here's what we're expecting you to say, or here's what we are expecting you to do, or show up at this time, wear this. This is the expectation. I think a lot of times we fall into tokenism and from a good place in our heart, right? Young people are super busy. They have a lot on their plate. They're pulled in all different directions. They're focusing on their grades, right? So we're going to give them all that they need and all they have to do is show up. And we're making life easy on them. But what a lot of young people say is, it kind of feels transactional, right? It kind of feels like I'm just showing up and, I'm not really a part of this. Early on in my career, fancy schmancy, one of those gala, asking for money or whatever. We're all in our fancy schmancy clothing. And we had asked 5 or 6 young people to come and share about their experiences. And I happened to be like running by because I was like trying to make sure the mics were working. And I heard one of the, big guy donors ask one of our young people, so, why do you do this? Why did you choose this? And the kid said, I don't know, I was just told to be here, right? And so you're like, I appreciate your honesty, and that's absolutely right. But I think a lot of the times it is this tokenism. I was told to be here. I was told to say this. I was told to do this. I don't know why we're doing this. I don't know what the outcome is. I don't know, who's providing the funder or ultimately what is the end goal, but I'm here and I'll put it on my CV. That next one is assigned but informed. So we've given them a role, we've given them a title, we've given them a responsibility, and we have given them the capacity, the behind the scenes, the education. So maybe they're open to going to some trainings, or we ourselves as the director or the program coordinator have provided some trainings for them. We've given them the history. They understand, where we're going. They understand to some extent how we're getting there. But again, this is really just one way. Like I'm telling the young people, I'm telling them all of this. I'm giving them all of this information. I've assigned them, they have a role, but there's not a lot of input or there's not a lot of information coming from that young person's voice or perspective or knowledge or experience. Again, I think a lot of us adults, we come from a really, really good place when we do this assigned but informed. I'm giving them the information. I'm making it easy for them. I'm making it so it's not just one more thing that they feel like they're stressed out or have to do. But in reality, the young people say, a lot of times I have lots of thoughts and lots of input that I would like to share and lots of ways that I would help navigate this. And, I have some feedback, but that feedback opportunity doesn't exist in this particular level of participation. This next one is consulted and informed. So I am open to receiving their advice, whether that is, if we're sitting on a team together, whether they're emailing me or texting me, whether they're just telling me. But I'm still the designer, I'm still the runner. But they feel free, they have a mechanism. It's not just once or done, but they can continue to give me feedback. they're informed, they know how I will use that input. And, eventually at the end of the year, I'm going to share the report out about how that input was addressed and what we saw as a result of that, right? Um, they probably don't have a lot of say in, seeing that or participating in that. And they may not give real-time feedback. But when it's all said and done, I do circle back and let them know how those outcomes were a result of the information that they shared. And then we have adult-initiated shared decisions with youth, right? So projects or programs are initiated by adults, but the decision-making is sharing with the youth. You can see we're getting a little bit closer here. So again, I come in with a project, I come in with an idea, I come in with a grant, a funding experience, and I say, all right, y'all, this is where we have to go. How are we going to get there? What are your ideas? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? Now, I'm going to have a huge asterisk here. We know that sometimes when we hand over control to our young people, that they may tend to walk over to some ineffective prevention strategies. Although I have to say, if we've done capacity building correctly and taught them about that, they probably shouldn't, right? But if they do lean into wanting to do strategies that aren't evidence-based, in this adult initiated shared decision with youth, it's not me coming in saying, no, 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 we can't do that. That's not evidence-based. That's not going to work. It's me saying, hey, y'all, let me give you some research and some knowledge. Once you watch this webinar or, once you listen to the speaker, once you read this paper, come back to me and let me know if you still think this is a strategy you want to invest in. So we let them see that there's some research out there that could maybe change their mind and say, okay, yeah, you're right. Now that I see what the numbers are saying, I see that this might not be the most effective, best strategy. Which it's a slight difference, right? Than me coming in and saying no, and me coming in saying, here's the information, here's some information that might tip your decision in a different direction. And then we have ultimately the tippy top of our ladder. We have youth, initiative, and directed, right? So this is the second to last here. So the youth put the program together. They're running the program, and we are strictly involved in a supportive role, right? This looks like, hey, Christi, what is the budget update now since we spent blah, 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 right? Christi, we think that you might have a better relationship with the mayor. Will you email them and CC me, right? I will figure out transportation while you guys work on the details of what the content will be. Really, the young people are driving this. They're selecting it. They're making sure that there is voice input, and they're a part of every single part of the process. And then lastly, we really, to get to that top, have youth initiative share decisions with adults. So this happens when projects or programs are initiated by youth and decision-making is shared between youth and adults. These projects empower youth while at the same time enabling them to access and learn from life experiences and expertise as adults. So really we're treating this as gaining those soft skills, right? Having those experiences of navigating real world life experiences, just like we would do in the professional work that we're doing, understanding that it's not necessarily all success. And what do we do to overcome those barriers? A lot of the times when we're doing this work, the feedback from the young people are, I don't want you to do it for me, or don't sugarcoat it for me. Let me see what those real world experiences are. If I can figure it out in this kind of prescribed safe bubble, I'll have more self-confidence and advocacy for myself when I don't have this group that are helping me navigate these more difficult decisions. I think I, for one, was definitely in the mindset that I want to set it all up because it definitely doesn't burden the young people that I'm working with. But when in reality, they want to do that. They want to be in the planning. They want to be in the nitty-gritty of the work. They want to learn. They want to, I think there's definitely some frustration and some embarrassment and some, I don't know, when barriers come up or when things are a failure, but there's also the opportunity to say, okay, I can navigate this. I can figure this out with all of you that are here. I also hear, I think more lately, that, there are limited spaces in my life where I have the ability to be heard, to be leaned on, to be viewed as somebody who is an expert. And I appreciate this platform and this forum. We talk about this in this field all of the time, right? Not about us without us. And if it's not about us without us, how are we defining that? Is it just a simple, I gave them a survey to find out what, is it as simple of like a listening session, or is it, they're navigating these activities, they're navigating these social media posts, they're navigating what we're working on. There's nothing, we come from we do what the funders allow us to do, right? And so a lot of the times, years ago, I would come in and say, hey, y'all, we're going to work on a combustible cigarette campaign, like stop using combustible cigarettes. And sometimes I would go into school districts and the young people would be really honest with me and say, hey, here it's not like a smoking cigarette issue, it's a dip issue. But my hands are tied because my funders are saying, well, you have to address, a very specific combustible cigarette campaign. So hearing from the young people and balancing the work that we have to do, we're required to do by leaders, by stakeholders, by funders, and what they are seeing in their own life, those funders and leaders are many layers removed, right? But what they're seeing in their own life as things that would have to be addressed for their community to be healthy and successful. When here at Prevention First, when we were first doing our youth summits and our mini grants, we were kind of very specific in what we would allow the young people to choose. So it was either like something for, to reduce binge drinking or to reduce underage drinking or address, marijuana use. But a lot of the young people were like, hey, I think you need to take a step back and broaden that. I think if we had a room with like hygiene products, deodorant, shampoo, the ability to wash clothes. I think if we had, safe paths to walk to school, one of the young people said, there's a crosswalk where nobody stops, they go real fast around the bend, and several kids had been hit in the school year, and kids are like, I'm not walking to school in this path when I could potentially be hurt. So addressing some of those concerns that the young people really voiced, as if you want to increase school engagement, if you want to increase grades, increase graduation rates, there are some things here that we really need to talk about and address that don't necessarily fit into these boxes that you have given us. And when you step back and you look at all the data, when you look at the shared risk and protective factors, addressing those are ultimately going to address those boxes that we had on that paper as well. There are shared risk and protective factors that we talk about all the time. And letting the young people, give us light bulb moments, opened up that dialogue and opened up that ability for the young people to say, okay, yeah, we're being heard, we're being acknowledged, we get where we're going here. So again, navigating this ladder isn't like linear, isn't set in stone. And there's some spots on this ladder that, maybe policies in your organization prohibit you from, right? And that's another discussion that we can maybe have a little bit later. But my thought for you all is, how much of this information is due to you, and then how much of this information do you think really could be applied to the work that you're doing with the young people, which leads us to our first individual activity. So really, I'm going to give you, 5 minutes. It seems like a lot, but I am going to stick to the 5 minutes because I really want you to think across the work that you're doing with, middle school, high school students, higher ed students, where do you think you personally, and then where do you think your agency falls on the ladder? And give some context around that. Why do you think that's where you lie? I greatly appreciate you all taking those 5 minutes to do some self-reflection. If you feel comfortable turning your camera back on, I greatly appreciate it. First, I want to talk about the wonderful comments that are in the chat box. There's so many nuggets of information that I really want to focus on here. So I want to talk about Heather here. And, I forgot to preface this. So yes, this is being recorded, but like this really is Vegas. Like what we talk about here stays in here. I'm gonna ask Evie about, the sharing of this, but uh I love what Angela, no, I'm going to start with Heather here. So Heather says probably around a 5, but sometimes more like 3 to 4, depending on how tight of a schedule we're on, or if the students aren't participating, taking like leadership. So Heather, excellent what you dropped in there. Thank you so much for saying that, because yes, sometimes the schedule that we are given does not necessarily meet a school district's requirement, right? I have been given money to do a project in a school, and the money was given to me in May, and it has to be spent by August. And oh my gosh, if you could see, look at all your faces. You all got it immediately. Like, who were the dummies that gave me money in May for schoolwork to be done in August? Like, not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. Or if it is, it's gonna be very low youth involvement because I didn't have time to necessarily build the capacity. They may be working their summer, collecting the money that they're gonna use for the whole year, right? They may have summer sports. There's a lot going on. Absolutely. And then let's talk about this whole, if they're not participating or taking like leadership. We've all had young people work with young people, and the group dynamics are just a little bit different, right? We've had dynamics where you're like, these are superstars, they can do it all without me, I don't have to worry about it, like I'm sitting back with my Starbies in the back of the room, like they've got this. And then we've got groups where they're just not gelling for some reason. And so, we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of experience on this call. And if you've got any tips or tricks to navigate that ladder when you've just got some ones that are just maybe real quiet or aren't necessarily ready to be the, I'm going to tell everybody else what to do. Thomas, I love that. Yes, right? I meet with students individually to set a game plan for their engagement. I love that, Thomas. Excellent, right? When you, this word is so formal, and there's a better word out there. I know you guys will tell me what the better word is, but when you onboard a new young person to your programming, it should be quite kind of similar to when you're onboarding a staff member, right? What do you like? What are your talents? Do you want to stand in the front of the room and give the presentation, or do you want to sit in the back and run tech, right? How much time can you give? Why are you here? What do you want to get out of it? How, is this something that you can see doing through your whole, high school career? Yeah, plan out what you're going to do. Life happens, right? We're not necessarily going to stick to that. But if we have a little bit of understanding for us, then maybe we can move them around a little bit with their input, encourage them, praise them, engage them, and they feel a little bit more sense of connection and empowerment. Yes, Haley, that strength analysis and pairing with a stronger youth. Yes. Think about matching too, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a senior to a freshman, but matching, sometimes you guys aren't going to believe it, but I'm a 100% an extrovert. Like, I will sit for 2 hours with my room closed and no sound after this just to bring my resources back to me, right? But sometimes, putting an extrovert with an introvert is better than a freshman with a senior. Sometimes somebody who's a little bit more creative with somebody who's more numbers. Sarah Sawmiller from Prevention First is next door to here. She saves my butt all the time. She'll see me counting on my fingers and she'll be like, "Oh, honey, you need somebody who's good with numbers, right? Come here." Those pairs work really well. Absolutely. Michael says, I struggle with this. It depends on the group, the school code. Yes. We have one school where students started their own without any. Yes. Other schools feel like 2 to 3 because of various environmental issues with those communities. Yes. 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 Michael, I'm going to say something, and I'm not sure if this is exactly what you meant here, but I think sometimes, again, when they start their own initiatives, they have little desire for me to come in and do anything, right? They're good to go. They're running. Uh, you know, I might offer some research or some advice. And then sometimes when a school tells me to come in, then they're kind of like, well, who are you to come in here and do this, right? Like you don't know anything about it. Like you're not a part of here. And so it is this kind of weird balance of where we as adults lie. And sometimes it's and I see this in adult work too, right? Sometimes I have to like kind of prove myself or show myself or do your work to show that I'm here, right? And I also have to be my original self as well. Like I can't come we work with youth. They'll sniff out like, they'll sniff us out in a moment. I mean, there's no way that I'm going to come across as like cool or smooth or in touch with anything. So I cannot even pretend to be that. Absolutely. So yeah, again, and sometimes when we're coming in to talk about tobacco or whatever it is, um, that's not the environmental issue that the community is dealing with, right? They've got other things they want to discuss and talk about. That's excellent. Yes, yes. Um, I want to go through these a couple real quick too. Again, what Angela said, my role is a little different since I'm not a school employee. I provide services. You're right. I think that does make it a little bit tricky, right? We're bound by different funders, different policies, different procedures, different ethics as well. So it can make it a little bit tricky. And being a part of the school might give us a little bit more, depending again on the school district and the community, a little bit more leniency. And sometimes we have to put in our time. Katie, I'm going to put pick on you. What's your quote? That is your and Aaron's quote. Slow. Say it for me. Go slow to go far. Ronnie, thank you for coming. Yes, yes. Go slow to go far. We're not immediately shooting to the top of, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? We are building those relationships. We're building the capacity. We're building the trust. We're building the supports and the partnerships. And that'll eventually create the spaces where our young people can thrive. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't be doing little things in between there to really give agency to our young people. But the rushing through to the ultimate goal is to get the young people as much advocacy, but sometimes it takes building the systems, building the relationships, building the rapport as well. Jonathan said, we have a leadership club for seniors to present supports and discuss events for students through the year. I would say from observing the club and trying to work with them the last year on prom committee, 5 to 7. Yeah, that one-on-one support when working with students. Absolutely. So maybe it's even outside of that larger group, and what those dynamics look like when you're just supporting, maybe it's even just the leadership, the executive part of the larger group. Absolutely. I will say again, I'm gonna go back here real quick, that while if we are saying that we're youth-led prevention, if we're saying that we're empowering youth, if we're giving advocacy to youth, that there should be some youth voice in there. There should be some youth participation. There should be some youth guidance. But this is something that is a continual work in process. And there's I would say Ohio has probably the most youth-led groups that are doing it at the best, right? Some of you are on this call. I think of, Haley and I think of Megan and I think of Molly and Impact and I think of Sean and Tanisha at Youth at the Center. I can name all of you are doing it really, really well. So I think the great thing about this work and understanding youth participation is that there are organizations throughout the state and all sorts of different communities that you could email and say, hey, give us some tips or tricks, give us what you did, give us, and they would be more than willing to share stories, to share expertise, to share skills. I even love in Ohio how we bring our young people so our young people can share. Our young people can be the teachers. Our young people can provide the education. And so I know that there's a lot of individuals in Ohio that would be more than willing to come in and work and share. We're always about sharing in this field, and that's so wonderful. Okay, so we've talked about our organizations, we talked about ourselves, we've talked about the ladders. We're not going to talk about action steps now. We're going to talk about, is there any ick that you're getting? Remember, this is a safe place. Is there any ick, any worries, any barriers, any like, yeah, but Christi, that you'd want to unmute and talk about or drop in the chat? Oh, Haley, I will mail you $20 because literally this is one of the ones that I was trying to slip to somebody to say, right? I wanted somebody to say, Christy, it's not the young people, it's the other adults in the room. It's not the young people. This is Christi Valentini-Lackner. This is not Prevention First. This is not sources. This is not my boss. This is not Evie. This isn't anybody. This is just Christy. Sometimes there are adults that are working in these spaces that maybe should not be working in these spaces. So I am lucky that I am in a position where I can say, hey, let's do some career mapping and let's talk about your strengths and let's see if we can figure out a space where you are really going to thrive and you're going to find your, right? But not all of us are in that space. And so I think, honestly, if there is some way that you can embed some sort of evaluation feedback loop in the work that you're doing, and that feedback work, that evaluation is a mixture of the young people's voice and feedback, the adults' feedback, the supervisor's feedback, and then whoever is the community connection, whether that's like a school, whether that's another organization, whether that's a church or a business. So all four of these components quarterly are filling out this feedback loop. It's anonymous. Nobody can figure out where it's coming from. And then everybody, the young people, the adults, the the community organizer, the school district, the supervisors, they all get a report about themselves, right? And so me as an adult, I get this feedback and people are saying, hey, you're too, the young people are going to say it much better than me. You're too controlling. You're out of touch. What somebody said my pants were too high. What they called them, I needed to, nobody wants to see my ankles. Christy, nobody wants to see your ankles, right? I was using too much product in my hair. They're tired of Subway. My co-presenter was boring, had really boring facilitation skills. Every time he talked, they wanted to fall. I mean, just that feedback loop is really important. And it's the feedback loop so it doesn't just rest on your shoulders or the young people's shoulders, that it's coming from multiple things. And that self-awareness is something that not everybody has, but at least your young people are seeing that you want them to be heard. They're getting a voice, they're getting to say, and you're giving some feedback, some construction to that person. And hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully little light bulbs will go on. And I do honestly believe that a little bit of change will happen over time. Anybody else have any thoughts or ideas around the adult in the room that's just not getting the memo? And I'm going to be completely honest here. Um, I am not for everybody, right? Some youth are going to click with me and some youth aren't. Some youth are going to click with my math teaching husband, and some aren't. And that's okay. Like, I have to be humble enough to know I'm not jiving with this group for whatever reason. Like, I'll try to do some homework and work on some skills, but for whatever reason, something's not. So maybe I need to step back and not be the lead. And representation matters. It's so important. Maybe I'm not the one that should be there. I should be building skills and capacity with adults that are from that community, that look like that community, that sound like that community, that represent that community. And so we have to be really careful about that. Um, yeah, knowing when to step. And sometimes it's hard. Again, a lot of us don't have those skills as well. I am 46 years old. I do not need to be the one leading the young people's groups, right? They don't need a 46-year-old white woman with secondhand embarrassment through TikTok, right? They don't need that. But maybe a couple years ago, I wasn't so hip to that, knowing that, right? So knowing that maybe I can just be in the background doing the reports, I can be in the background advocating for them. And sometimes when if Jade were to come to me and Jayla would come to me and say, hey, the young people to do that, want to do this. And I'm like, oh, I have to check myself. Like, am I, oh, because I'm just so out of touch and old? Or am I, oh, because it's not jiving with the science? Like, why am I, oh? So let me do some self-reflection first on that and then come back and be like, yeah, that's awesome. Or teach me more about that. Or I don't want to be there, but I think it sounds great, right? So yeah, I think that's really important to know too, that you don't have to be the end all to be all. You can flex in and out and build capacity of the adults in those communities as well. Any other thoughts about icks or worries or concerns when it comes to the ladder of participation? Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. And learn yourself too. That's the other thing these young people have said to me, and God, thank God, like I'm not your Google. Like it's not my responsibility to educate you. You need to figure it out on your end. I'm not your token, like I'm going to tell you what this means, or I'm going to explain this wordage to you, or I'm going to hold your hand like this, right? Now, sometimes they'll take pity on me and, tap my hand and be like, no, 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 please. Um, but it is my responsibility, just with any other population, any group that we were going to meet with, we would be doing our homework, right? Any group that we were going to do a large project with, we would do our homework. Same thing with them. Yeah, Miss Christie, I'm not your Google. You are correct. You are absolutely right. Be open to learn yourself. All right. We've, in some shape or form or way, we've talked about moving up in the ladder. We've talked about how maybe time constraints, maybe community constraints, maybe our role doesn't necessarily allow us to move up the ladder. But I would challenge you to say, if you were going to make 2 to 3 actionable steps out of here, even if you're at the 5, the 6, the 7th, the 8, what can we do, maybe not within our youth, but within the adults or our community or other prevention organizations that can help them understand that maybe not necessarily the structure of this ladder, but the voice of our young people and how important it is to have them be a part of the work that we're doing and be recognized for it. Allow them to be seen as a community leader, as actively contributing to their community. We know all those are assets. We know they're all protective factors, right? Building those soft skills. And you work with young people. You have some that are going to be really, really open to this, and then some that are going to need a lot of soft skill building to get them there. And that's okay too. That's capacity building. And I do firmly believe that there is a role in the work that we do for every single type of person, right? You have young folks that do love data. I I still am no good with numbers, right? But we have young people that are sponges when it comes to that. We have young people that want to understand the strategic prevention framework, to want to understand how to reduce stigma, to want to understand, how do I teach people about the change and personal growth and supporting, but taking care of themselves, how to, engage in resources, understand how to navigate therapy. There is a quiet spot, there's a loud spotlight spot. It's kind of our work to kind of navigate those, but be open to the young people saying this is the role I want as well. And then to let them be like, I don't feel like doing this today. There's a lot going on in the world. There's so much going on in the world, right? We have fully developed brains, and sometimes I come in and hide under my desk for 15 minutes. Remind yourself that their brains are not fully developed, and if they want to take a break, uh, we will go slow to go far. We will go slow to go far. So, um, and then lastly, I just want to really touch on, these are some resources that'll be in the slide. There's some other documentation that I'll share with the slide as well. The Empowered Youth link isn't up yet, but I'll make sure that I include it in this slide. And then also Youth at the Center. I think Youth at the Center will be housing a lot of the resources that the Hay Youth Fellows have created, so I'll add theirs as well. And then, like any research, like any documentation, there's lots out there These are the ones that I could find that were not behind a paywall. But there's so much out there. And if you have other accesses, Amanda on this call is a whiz at understanding our public libraries. One of her gifts and talents is just knowing how to use the library as a resource for just about everything in your life. I'm sure Amanda could help us navigate if there are some paywalls that you guys want to find this documentation. But I think it's personally fascinating. I think it really does apply to the work that we do.